All right, let's dive in. So many of you wanted us to explore how AI is going to impact the future of work, and we've got a ton of really interesting stuff to look at today.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
We're talking economic forecasts, like the hard numbers and stuff.
Right.
Plus, we'll look at some philosophical stuff, too, like what it even means to work.
Yeah,
Oh, and real-world examples, too, which is always cool.
for sure.
But here's the thing. AI isn't just about robots coming to steal our jobs.
No.
It's like changing how we even think about work.
It really is a whole new way of looking at things. Like, we used to think AI would just take over the routine, boring stuff.
Right, right.
But now we're seeing it do things that require thinking, problem solving, stuff we thought only humans could do.
I was looking at this OECD report, and it said 27% of jobs are, at high risk of being automated.
Wow.
That's a big number. I don't know about you, but that kind of makes me nervous.
Yeah, 27% globally is a huge shift. And it's different from how technology has changed things in the past.
Okay, how so?
Well, AI can learn and adapt, right?
Right.
So it's not just doing the same thing over and over again. It's actually getting smarter. Take self-driving trucks, for example.
Oh, yeah, those are getting a lot of attention.
Our sources suggest that they could end up replacing like 3.5 million truck drivers in the U.S. alone.
3.5 million people.
Wow.
And that's just one industry. Can you imagine what that means for, the whole economy?
The ripple effect is definitely going to be massive.
And it's not just, blue-collar jobs that are at risk, right?
Nope, not at all. AI is already changing white-collar jobs, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What? Give me an example.
Well, there are AI tools that can write contracts, analyze legal documents, even write code.
AI writing code. That is wild.
It is, and it's happening now.
Yeah.
So think about the impact on lawyers, programmers, even journalists.
Yeah, that code writing thing really got my attention.
Yes.
I mean, what does that even mean for people in those jobs in the future?
It's a big question for sure.
So give us a real-world example. How is this stuff actually playing out in companies?
Well, look at what Amazon's doing in their warehouses.
Okay, yeah, they've got a lot of robots.
Tons of them. And those robots are handling a lot of the heavy lifting and the repetitive tasks.
Makes sense.
So they need fewer people for manual labor. And the jobs that are left are more about supervising the robots.
So are we going to end up with this job polarization thing where AI creates jobs for super skilled people to manage it, but also leads to more low-wage jobs, the kind where you're basically just watching robots?
That's a big concern, yeah. Economists are worried about this squeeze on the middle class.
Okay, so we've talked about the economics of AI, like jobs disappearing, new jobs popping up, and maybe more inequality.
Right?
But our sources also get into some philosophical questions about AI.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting for me. What happens to our sense of self, our identity, if AI changes what work even means?
That's a deep one. We've always defined ourselves by what we do for work, right?
So-
Our jobs give us purpose, a routine, a sense of belonging. But what if all that changes drastically?
That's a good point. There's this idea from Hannah Arendt, she called it vita activa, the idea that humans need to engage in meaningful work.
Right.
So if AI starts doing a lot of what we consider work now, does that mess with our ability to express our vita activa?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Does AI free us up to do things that are more aligned with our vita activa?
Right.
Or does it just make us feel useless? Like, what's the point of us?
I mean, I have to ask, how much of your own identity is tied to the work you do? What would you even do with all your time if traditional work wasn't necessary anymore?
That's a good one.
I bet you'd be surprised by the answer if you really thought about it.
Probably. I think it's a question we all need to be asking ourselves.
Okay, so we've talked about the problems, but our sources mention some possible solutions too.
They do.
One that keeps coming up is universal basic income, or UBI. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, UBI. It's being tested in places like Finland and California as a safety net for people who might lose their jobs to automation.
So, if your job gets taken over by a robot, you still have some money to live on.
Exactly.
But does that really solve the problem?
It helps with financial security, for sure, but it doesn't really address the meaning of life stuff, you know?
I see what you mean. Even if you're getting paid, you still might feel lost without a job.
Right.
So what else is out there? What other ideas are people talking about?
Well, some people are talking about redefining what work even means.
What does that even mean?
What if we stopped focusing so much on just being productive and making money
Okay.
and started valuing things like caring for others, making art, building community?
Huh. So, like, those things would become a kind of work.
Yeah, exactly. Like, imagine a world where those activities were seen as essential, just as important as any other job.
It's a pretty big shift in thinking.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do you get people to value those things as much as a traditional job?
That's the challenge for sure. But some countries are already trying out new
Oh,
models.
yeah. Like who?
Well, Iceland, for example, they experimented with a 4-day work week.
A 4-day work week. Sign me up. What happened?
It actually worked out really well. Employees were happier, more productive, and there wasn't really any drop in output, which suggests that maybe, just maybe, our old ideas about work need to change.
Yeah, a shorter work week. I think a lot of people would be happy about that. But what about the people whose jobs are like right on the front lines of being automated?
That's where lifelong learning comes in, big time.
So like going back to school, taking online courses, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Governments and companies need to invest in programs that help people learn new skills and adapt to the changing job market.
Makes sense. So people can stay ahead of the robots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our source mentions Singapore. They have this program called Skills Future. It's all about helping people stay relevant in a world where technology is constantly changing.
That sounds like a good model.
It is.
But here's a crazy thought. The source also mentions using AI itself to, like, help us deal with all this disruption.
Really?
Yeah, like what if AI could personalize education or help people find new jobs that match their skills?
It's almost like fighting fire with fire, using the technology that's causing the problem to fix it.
Exactly. It's a bit of a paradox, right?
Totally.
Mm.
But it's a fascinating idea. Like, imagine AI figuring out what the job market of the future will look like.
And then helping people prepare for it.
Yeah. Creating personalized learning plans, connecting people with the right opportunities. That's powerful stuff.
Okay, so we've got UBI, redefining work, lifelong learning, and even using AI to help us navigate all this change.
A lot of options on the table.
But there's a big elephant in the room, right? Like, who's ultimately responsible for making sure this transition to an AI-powered world is fair? Who's going to make sure no one gets left behind?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The question of responsibility.
Totally. Should
Yeah.
the government step in and, like, provide a safety net and invest in education and training?
Possibly.
Or what about the tech companies? They're the ones making all the money from AI. Shouldn't they have some kind of moral obligation to help the workers who are losing their jobs because of it?
A good point.
There are no easy answers here.
Definitely not. Our source talks about corporate responsibility. Like, some people argue that these big tech giants should be funding retraining programs or paying what they call an automation tax.
An automation task.
Yeah, to help cover the costs of all this change.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if these companies are the ones pushing all this AI stuff, shouldn't they also help deal with the consequences?
Makes you think, right?
It really does. And there's another layer to this whole thing, global equity. Like, will the benefits of AI be spread out fairly across the world?
Right.
Or will developing countries end up getting left behind? What if they face job losses but don't have the resources to adapt?
That's a real concern. This whole AI thing feels like this massive societal shift. And we have to make sure it's a just and equitable transition for everyone. The stakes are high.
Absolutely. We're talking about the future of work, the future of society. It's huge.
It is. We need to think carefully about the long-term consequences of the choices we're making right now. Like, what kind of world are we building for future generations?
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of all this new technology,
Right.
but we need to remember the human side of it too.
For sure. This is a lot to take in, but understanding all the complexities is the first step to figuring out how to navigate this new world.
You're right. It's a lot to process, but we've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think it's time for a little break. We'll be back in a bit to explore how different countries are approaching this whole AI revolution. Stay tuned.
So we've been talking about how AI could change, like, everything about what you're...
Yeah,
And it seems like there's a lot of potential for good, but also some big risks.
definitely.
But I'm wondering, are there any countries out there that are trying to find that sweet spot? You know, like embracing AI, but also making sure it benefits everyone. There are a few, yeah. Our source mentions Japan. They have this thing called Society 5.0.
Society 5.0. What is that? Some kind of sci-fi thing?
It kind of sounds like it, right?
Yeah.
But basically, it's their plan for using AI to boost their economy and improve society. But they're trying to do it in a way that puts human values first.
Okay, so it's not just about, like, robots taking over everything.
No, it's more nuanced than that. For example, they're investing a lot in elder care
The
robots.
elder care robot.
Yeah, Japan has a rapidly aging population, so they're looking at ways to use robots to help care for the elderly.
That's actually pretty cool. So it's not just about efficiency and productivity. It's about actually using AI to help people.
Exactly. They're also exploring AI in healthcare and education, and even using AI to design more sustainable cities.
So it sounds like they're really trying to think about the big picture, the long-term impact of AI on people's lives.
Yeah, they're definitely taking a holistic approach.
I like that. Are there any other countries that are kind of on the same page, trying to make sure AI doesn't just benefit the rich and powerful?
The Nordic countries are often held up as examples. They're already known for having strong social safety nets.
Yeah, and they really value work-life balance, right?
Exactly. And now they're putting a lot of resources into education and retraining programs to help people adapt to the changing job market.
It seems like these countries are recognizing that AI isn't just something that's happening to us, it's something we can shape and direct.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and let AI determine our future. We need to be proactive.
Which brings us back to those downsides we were talking about earlier. It's great to think about all the cool things AI could do,
Yeah.
but we also need to be realistic about what could go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. We can't just ignore the risks. We have to be prepared to deal with them.
So let's get into it. What are some of the things that could go wrong if we're not careful with AI?
Well, job displacement is a big one. Even if AI creates new jobs, there's no guarantee that there will be enough to replace the ones that are lost.
Right, right. And even if there are enough jobs, what about the people whose skills become obsolete? How do they transition to something new?
That's a huge question. And what if AI ends up automating more jobs than it creates?
Wow, yeah, that would be a major problem, not just for the economy, but for society as a whole.
It would. People need to feel like they have a purpose, a role to play.
Exactly. What happens if millions of people find themselves without work and without a clear path forward?
It's a scary thought. We might need to completely rethink our social structures, our education systems, even our concept of leisure and free time.
It's almost like we need to redefine what it means to live a good life in a world where work might not be the center of everything.
It's a massive shift in perspective, and I'll admit it's a little daunting to think about.
It is, but it's also kind of exciting, right? Like this is a chance to create something new, something better.
It is. It's a time of great uncertainty, for sure, but it's also a time of tremendous opportunity.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those opportunities. We already mentioned UBI, but what about retraining and upskilling? Are those realistic solutions for the people whose jobs are most likely to be automated?
They're definitely part of the solution. And it's not just about learning specific technical skills. It's also about developing adaptability, resilience, the kind of skills that will help people thrive in a constantly changing world.
It's like the ability to learn how to learn is going to be more important than ever.
Exactly.
It's funny, the same technology that's disrupting the workforce could also be used to help people navigate that disruption, right?
Definitely.
Like, could we use AI to personalize education and training, make it more effective and accessible to more people?
That's an idea that a lot of people are excited about. Imagine AI being used to identify your strengths and weaknesses,
Oh, wow.
tailor a learning plan just for you,
That would be amazing.
and even connect you with job opportunities that match your skills and interests.
Okay, that sounds really promising. But retraining and upskilling are only part of the puzzle, right?
Mm,
We also need to think about the role of government and businesses in creating a future of work that's sustainable and equitable.
You're absolutely right. We need policies that support workers during this transition. Investments in infrastructure, in education, and businesses need to step up and prioritize the well-being of their employees. This isn't just about technology, it's about values and choices.
It's about making sure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of how AI changes the world of work.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the big question. How do we actually make that happen? How do we create a future of work that's both prosperous and humane?
That is the question, isn't it?
And I think that's a perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some of the challenges and possibilities of creating a future of work that truly works for everyone. Okay, so we've explored a lot about how AI could change work, the economic stuff, the philosophical stuff, even some possible solutions.
We have to think about.
And I think the main thing that's sticking with me is that we have a choice to make. We can either just let AI kind of happen to us,
Right.
or we can try to shape AI to create the kind of future we want.
I think that's a really powerful way to look at it. This isn't just about like passively watching a tech revolution unfold.
Yeah.
It's about actually participating in shaping its direction,
Yeah.
making sure it aligns with our values.
But before we get too carried away with all the, utopian possibilities of AI,
Yeah.
I think we need to be real about the potential downsides, the stuff that could go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. We have to be honest about the risks and challenges, and we have to
Simple.
be ready to deal with them head on.
So let's talk about that. Like, what are some of the things that could go wrong if we're not careful with how we develop and use AI?
Well, one big concern is that AI could actually make existing inequalities worse.
How so?
You know how AI systems are trained on massive amounts of data?
Right.
Well, if that data reflects societal biases, the AI system could end up amplifying those
Oh,
biases.
I see what you mean. So, like, if you're using an AI system to, I don't know, screen job applicants,
Right.
and the data it's trained on reflects historical biases against, say, women or people of color,
Exactly.
then the AI system might end up perpetuating those biases,
Right.
even if that wasn't the intention.
Exactly. And it's not just hiring. Think about loan approvals, healthcare decisions, even the criminal justice system. There's a real danger that AI could be used to reinforce existing power structures and make things even less fair.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
So how do we prevent AI from becoming a tool for discrimination? How do we make sure it's used for good?
Well, one important step is to make sure there's diversity in the teams that are developing and deploying these AI systems.
Makes sense. You want people with different backgrounds and perspectives involved so they can catch those biases early on.
Exactly. And we also need clear ethical guidelines and regulations, rules of the road for AI development and use.
So like some kind of AI ethics code.
Yeah, something like that. Actually, the European Union has already proposed some regulations that are aimed at promoting transparency and reducing bias in AI systems.
Transparency seems really important. Like people need to be able to understand how these AI systems work and how they're being used.
Absolutely. Transparency builds trust.
Hmm.
And it also makes it easier to hold people accountable when things go wrong.
Speaking of things going wrong, another concern I heard a lot about is the whole surveillance thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like the idea that AI could be used to track our every move and make decisions about our lives without us even knowing it.
It's definitely a valid concern, especially with all the advances in facial recognition technology and data collection. We need to have a serious conversation about where we draw the line between security and privacy.
Right. Like, how do we make sure AI is used to protect people, not control them?
That's the question, isn't it? It feels like we're entering this whole new territory and the stakes are really high. We need to be having these conversations now before it's too late.
I agree. But given all the potential risks and challenges, why are we even bothering with AI at all? Wouldn't it be safer to just, like, opt out?
I understand that feeling, but I think it would be a huge mistake to just reject AI altogether. It has so much potential to help us solve some of the biggest problems we're facing, climate change, disease, poverty. To turn our backs on that potential out of fear, I think that would be a real loss.
So it's not about saying no to AI. It's about figuring out how to use it responsibly and ethically.
Exactly. It's about making sure that AI aligns with our values as human beings,
Yeah.
that it's used to make the world a better place, not a worse one.
I like that. It's about choosing hope over fear. And it's about taking an active role in shaping the future we want. So what can our listeners do? How can they help make sure AI is used for good?
Well, first of all, stay informed. Read about AI, learn how it works, understand its limitations. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this new world.
Knowledge is power. What else?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Challenge assumptions. Push back against ideas that don't sit right with you. This is a technology that will affect all of us, so it's important that we all have a say in how it's developed and used.
I love that. It's about reclaiming our agency, not just as workers, but as citizens.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't a one-time conversation. AI is constantly evolving, so we need to stay engaged, stay curious, and stay committed to creating a future where AI works for everyone, not just a select few.
That's a great call to action. This isn't the end of the conversation, it's just the beginning. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to keep learning and exploring and engaging with this topic. It's complex, it's challenging, but it's also incredibly exciting.
I agree. The future of work is in our hands, and I believe we have the power to create something truly amazing.
And on that hopeful note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into AI and the future of work. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of ideas.